for Community Conversations, a program focusing on the people working to make the Jonesboro community a better place while offering viewpoints from all sides of the issues. The views expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of KLEK 102.5 FM, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, or our underwriters or sponsors.
KLEK 102.5 FM. Good morning to you. This is Monday, October 17th, 2016, which means it is Mayor's Week on Community Conversations, and I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. All this week, we are going to have all of the candidates running for mayor of Jonesboro on the show today. Cato Wonder is in the studio with you today, along with my co-host, Mrs. Quabila Harden, and we have our first candidate today, Mr. John W. Street, and he is currently on the city council, and he is running for mayor of Jonesboro. KLEK and the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council does not endorse nor support any candidate for office, nor was any compensation provided for this interview. This interview is provided for information purposes only. How are you doing today, Mr. Street?
Fine. How are you?
All right, doing good. Mr. Street, just tell the listeners about who you are and your background.
Well, my name is John W. Street. I'm a lifelong resident of Jonesboro. I'm 63 years old. I'm a graduate of Nettleton High School. I'm a graduate of Arkansas State. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration. I spent 20 years in the Arkansas Army National Guard. I retired as a major. I was an Army engineer officer. I've been on Valley View School Board, just some of my volunteer public life. I've spent two 5-year terms, 10 years on the Valley View School Board. I was appointed to MAPC and served 2 years on that. I've been on the City Council for 14 years. I'm currently on my 4th term. I have been a reserve police officer with the City of Jonesboro for 14 years. Well, actually a little over 14, almost 15. On the City Council, I am chairman of Public Works. I'm on the Finance Committee. I'm on Rules and Nominating Committee. I have been on the Public Safety Committee, but because of my participation with the Reserve Program, I felt it was a conflict of interest and got off of that. I'm chairman of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Policy Committee. I've done that for several years. I've also been on the board of directors of City Water and Light, very proud of that, for the last 9 years. And on their board, I serve on their Audit and Budget Committee, which is like our Finance Committee. I serve on their Customer Service Committee, and I'm chairman of the Streetlights Committee.
Well, Mr. Street, you obviously have done a lot in your time of service, so obviously you have lots of qualifications for the position. So normally what I ask, what makes you qualified to be mayor, but I think you kind of took care of that question. So I'm going to ask you, why did you make the decision to run for mayor?
Well, Jonesboro is a wonderful place, and as you said, I've done a lot of things in my lifetime. In fact, most of my adult life I've spent in some volunteer capacity when we're and I'm not alone. If you look around Jonesboro, that's what makes us great. I tell people that all the time. It's our force multiplier. We have such a wonderful community, and people who do things, they're not looking for any kind of recognition. They just step up and do it because it needs to be done. It makes this a vibrant community, and that's why we're so successful in any atmosphere. The churches, the civic groups, even to some extent a lot of the governmental agencies and things people do. They do have people first and foremost in their mind and try to make this a better community for everybody. And given our size, we were just talking about that a while ago. Our population by the census last time was 67,263, but currently our census puts us at a little over 72,000 people. And Arkansas State University has a record enrollment this semester of 14,074. And at any given time, we've got another 15 or 20,000 people on the street that come here to work or for medical help or for recreation or to shop or just to do business. So it's a fairly large community, and I don't think we could do a lot of the things that we do without the volunteer spirit in this city that helps people and makes it a better place.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Well, since you got into talking about square mileage and population and things of that nature, let's talk about the annexation. How do you feel about adding more land space to?
Well, Jonesboro had a major annexation in 1989. That was prior to me being on the council, but they annexed 45 square miles, which places us at technically around 82 and a half square miles. I think we've got plenty of city to continue to grow in. I don't really favor annexing anymore. In fact, it places us at somewhat of a disadvantage with our density as far as our fire rating goes.
Okay.
Fire marshal consistently monitors that, and Chief Miller cautions us. I know we just annexed 20 acres out off of Macedonia Road, but it was basically surrounded by city property.
Okay.
It wasn't totally surrounded, but it was on 3 sides, and then if you cross Macedonia Road, you're in the county. So it just made sense to annex that 20 acres and add the continuity of services to the city.
Okay.
But we de-annexed 60 acres off of Arrowhead Farm Road because the lack of electricity running to it, CWL, it would have been impossible for them, well, not impossible, but it wasn't practical. It was going to cost around $140,000 to run electrical lines to that property. Craighead Electric was already there, so they petitioned us to de-annex them because they were only going to build a house or two and have some horses, and it made sense, and it went through the council. In fact, we did that our last meeting 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So I can see that the council is, and the city government is looking out for the best interests of the people.
Yes, ma'am. Especially with our fire rating, as we talked about earlier.
Okay.
We have and I'm very proud of the fact that we have a Class 1 fire rating. For a city our size, that's an incredible feat. And not because it provides cheaper insurance. It does several things. It makes it more attractive to industry or business looking for some place to open, which provides more jobs, but it also provides a level of protection for our citizens. There's no one over 5 minutes away from emergency service protection, and that's the good part about it.
For those who may not know, can you maybe explain a little bit more about what the fire rating is exactly?
I was just about to ask that question.
Well, the ISO rates cities based on their population, the location of fire stations to administer services, the water availability, and again, CWL's played a major part in that because even in the areas, our large 82 and a half square miles, the water's already out there. The mains, the fire hydrants, it's all set in place. They had their part done as far as the #1 rating years ago, but it also factors in things like policies that you have for construction to keep people from having flooding. I know we passed in our stormwater drainage manual, where we're halfway there, but any new homes built, the base the floor level of a home has to be 1 foot above the base floodplain elevation.
Okay.
So because you have policies like that in place too, that enhances your ISO rating. It takes a lot of different things.
Okay.
But it's a very complex thing. Again, you have to have the number of people, the number of stations, the right equipment, their location throughout the city. But we're blessed. It's finally all come together, and we've achieved that almost impossible task of getting a Class 1 fire rating.
We're speaking with Jonesboro City Councilman John W. Street. He is a candidate for mayor. This is Mayor's Week on Community Conversations. If you have a question for Mr. Street, you can call us at 870-277-1080. Once again, that phone number is 870-277-1080. We're also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Shout out to the people who are watching our live stream video. If you have a question or a comment for Mr. Street, you can also post it there as well. Mr. Street, with projections that the city of Jonesboro will continue to grow about 3% every year, what are your feelings about traffic and the increase of traffic and what it's going to take to solve the traffic issues?
Look, I tell my wife, she complains about traffic all the time, and I'll tell everybody, we have situations, we have inconvenience, we don't really have traffic problems. Little Rock has traffic problems. When you're dead still in 6 lanes of traffic, that's a traffic problem. When your ramps are jam-packed, Memphis and Little Rock have it. Now don't get me wrong, we have traffic, and it's getting to be more of a concern, but we recently were awarded $90 million in highway or traffic improvements for Jonesboro in the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Plan. Alec Farmer, who's our highway commissioner, who resides in Jonesboro, he brought $90 million to us. We had to match it with $7.8 million, and we did transfer that over about a month ago. The city of Jonesboro earmarked those funds as our part of that $90 million. That's our participating contribution is $7.8 million, our matching money. But those, while they won't fix every problem we've got, they address issues all over Jonesboro. And they will give us some relief. That's the eastern corridor that's going to connect Commerce to 63 and Clinton School Road, which is, or well, 49. It'll give people a bypass kind of on the east side. Not the big bypass we'd love to have. I'd love to see a north bypass that would go from almost Bono over to Brooklyn and then go east and hit 63. That would really be a bypass. This is more or less going to be it will bypass some and pull a lot of the traffic that we have now off of the corridor out by NEA Baptist Hospital and Red Wolf. But I tell you, in 2 years, something else that the Highway Department's doing is not for us, but at Paragould. When 412 is extended on over to 67, we're going to see a big reduction in truck traffic that now has to come through Jonesboro, down south, corridor. They come through the NEA corridor on Johnson, they hit Red Wolf, they go down to 63, go 49 south, and then 67, 26, 67. They'll then, the trucks coming out of Missouri and that part of the state won't be coming down through us. They'll take 412 straight over to 67 at Pocahontas, and that'll cut down quite a bit of that traffic. So any relief we get's a blessing. I was just talking to her too, we opened up, in fact, we constructed a 3/4 mile extension from Straw Floor Road on Parker down to Washington. And that takes some traffic off of Southwest Drive in the mornings from people who are going to the downtown area. Once they get used to taking that route, they'll find out that'll save them a little traffic and it'll pull some off Southwest Drive. We're remodeling quite a few of our intersections and have already, putting double turn lanes and dedicated right turn lanes and trying to facilitate more traffic through some of the same area. Our traffic engineer, Mark Nichols, has done a fantastic job of that. He's also coordinated and synchronized a lot of our traffic signals and computerized them. So if you get on Red Wolf now, you'll see that it's a lot easier to make it from one end to the other, because usually when you catch a green light, you'll go all the way through.
Yes.
But he does monitor those, and he changes them for peak times and different times of the day, morning rush hour, lunch, the going home, and all weekends. But Mark does a great job for us in that capacity, and it just helps us to do a little smarter management of our traffic. You can't always widen every road, so you just have to figure out a way to run more cars efficiently on the same asphalt that you have. And he's done a great job of it, and the city's constantly looking for ways to improve roads and intersections, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is just money. But we'll continue to participate in those state programs, and we'll continue to expand.
And speaking of that, we talked a little bit about, there was a story on KIT about the hot zones, and the police department is trying to figure out why are there so many accidents during a certain time frame and in certain areas, and you went into that. So.
Yeah, I believe we've got a lot of traffic that hits a lot of choke points because they're going the same way. And when they do, and people are in a rush, they tend to not be as observant. They tend to speed a little bit. They tend to run a few stop signs and red lights, and those are the things that cause accidents. That and not paying attention. There's a lot of people that they're on that cell phone texting. They know they shouldn't be doing it, but I see them do it all the time. But it's dangerous. It's actually a proven fact that texting and driving is more hazardous than being under the influence and driving.
Oh my!
So you'll see officers out at some of these major intersections, and when the traffic stops, they're going to be out walking through the group, and if you're not wearing your seatbelt, you're subject to a citation. If you're on your cell phone texting, they're going to get you. So just a word of advice, a little heads up, you need to be paying attention and watching, because they are going to crack down on it. And it's for people's safety. It's not to be mean. It's just to make sure nobody's injured any more than they have to be with all the traffic we do have flowing through some of those choke points. So it's a benefit for the citizens and for their welfare.
Okay.
Once again, we are speaking with Councilman John W. Street. He is a candidate for Jonesboro mayor. All right, Councilman Street, of course, one of the things that a mayor gets to do if elected to office is choose department heads. So if you are elected mayor, do you foresee any major changes of department heads? Will you pretty much leave the department heads currently as they are, or what kind of personnel changes may you make?
Well, most of our department heads are, in fact, have probably been with the city less than 16 months. We have two that have been with us. Craig Light, our engineer who oversees engineering, and Eric is our IT. He's been there. Donnie Gibson is our sanitation director, but he was there under Royce Leonard. We've got a great staff. I would not foresee making any changes. Most of the people I believe we have are very qualified. They serve the citizens well. They work well with the council, and that's what we're looking for. People who will work with the citizens and work with the council, work with the city to provide the best services that we possibly can.
Okay. Now, what about other departments? Parks and Rec or police, or would you say day one that after you're sworn in, if you were to win, would you just say, okay, let's have a staff meeting, let's see what's going on with different departments, and then?
Well, I stay up with as a councilman, and
Okay.
I'm fairly active, I stay up with about everything that
Okay.
we do, and that's why I got a lot of faith in the people that we have. Wixon Huffstetler, our department director, he's been working on a deal the last 4 years, talking with the property owners that adjoin Joe Mack Campbell Park. And if you've been reading the paper, we sent it to council from finance, but we're going to acquire a considerable size piece of property next to that, which is going to provide us additional opportunities for soccer fields, for football fields, for an expansion of that facility. Well, I'll tell you now, Wixon, he said possibly an aquatic park, and I know the mayor talks about an aquatic park.
Yeah, we was going to ask about that. So let's go ahead and transition into that. What are your thoughts on things such as the aquatic park? Is it best for the city to get involved with it? Should the city encourage a private developer to put it in and maybe give them some tax breaks or land or something? So just kind of give your thoughts on that.
You're absolutely right. We should assist a private developer if they have a mind to develop a park like that. I'd have no problem working with somebody, but it should be private enterprise. I mean,
Okay.
if you talk to Mike Gaskell, the mayor of Paragould, is a good friend of mine, and he's told us the only mistake he thinks he's ever made as mayor was getting involved with that water park they have. He said it's a money pit. It just constantly costs them money. The one up at Batesville, Mayor Ellenbaugh did, they're $2 million overrun, and when they get it open, they're going to have to hire 45 to 50 employees to put on their payroll. Their tax for the city of Batesville is already 10.5 cents. They're going to have more tax over time. That's just a fact. As they grow, they'll have to, and they're already at 10.5 cents. I don't think that's going to attract too many people that want to put a business in. We'd go move to a city, and I think a lot of their citizens may be shopping outside of the city limits of Batesville at 10.5 cents. But I do favor placing additional swimming pools. I'd love to see a swimming pool north at Parker Park.
Yes.
I'd love to see one over at Allen Park. Now, we've got splash pads up there, and the kids use those a lot, and they're
Yes.
great. They've been wonderful. But I think we need to put additional swimming pools in those areas. I'd love to see one out at Joe Mack Campbell Park.
Okay.
And then we've got the one there, the old YMCA pool, which is okay, but it's not enough to cover what we need, and a lot of kids can't get there.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
how
possible.
would, now since those are on city-owned property, how would those be paid for?
By city, we'd pay for them. Now, if there's grants to do them, they're talking, those pools would cost several $1 million a piece. And I wouldn't mind having a pool that has a covered structure that could be used for swim meets. Now, if somebody wants to call that an aquatic pool or whatever, but it would meet the need for a swim team.
Okay.
And I don't have a problem with that. But we could also rework Craighead Forest. We used to have a beach and a swimming area out there, and I'd love to see us go back and do that
I
again.
remember that.
And
Yes.
City Water and Light will put in an aerator for us. I think we can do that, lower the level. When we get our walking trail complete, I think that'd be an excellent addition to that. When I was a kid here, we had 4 pools, basically. You had City Water, you had the Earl Bell Center, you had the YMCA, you had E. Boone Watson Center, a pool down there, and we had Craighead Forest. And
Wow.
with 4 pools, there was enough pools in enough different areas of the city. They were accessible to all our children. They could use them. Now, the pool over there, the one we've got, when it's full, they don't let anybody in. They count until somebody leaves, and then they'll let somebody else in. But the main thing's access.
Yes.
We need to put these things out in different areas of the city where they're actually functional for kids. And you talk about the water park, going back to that again, the cost per day for that. If a family has 4 or 5 kids, and typically they charge $10 or $12 a day to go to those, how many days do you think those kids will get to go if it costs that family $60 to send them over to the water park for a day? You can go to swim for $1.50 or $2, and I mean that's affordable, and it's something that kids love to do, and they can spend the day in a swimming pool and have a great time.
I would like to transition.
Well, actually, we're going to have to get ready to go to break. And, of course, and when we get back to break, we'll ask you a question. And I got a question as well, because you mentioned about the city paying for these parks. And it also kind of ties into the pay raises, as well as there's been some issues raised of how we're going to pay for all this stuff. Can't use reserve funds and all of that. We are speaking with Councilman John W. Street. He is running for mayor of Jonesboro. Don't forget, if you got a call or a question for Mr. Street, the phone number is 870-277-1080. Once again, that phone number is 870-277-1080. You listen to KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
Ladies, are you putting unfair expectations on your husband? I'm Mark Merrill with today's Family Minute. When our expectations for our spouse become unreasonable, we're really setting our marriages up to falter, and wives should avoid. First, that he will always get you. My wife Susan sometimes says, "You just don't get me." And she's right. As a man, I don't think like Susan and don't always understand how she's feeling even when I try. The second unfair expectation is that he can read your mind. Most men are not good at deciphering subtle hints, so be clear and direct. For more unfair expectations to avoid, visit my blog at markmerrill.com. Remember, your family first.
Family Minute is made possible by the Kappa Nu Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a nonprofit organization committed to service to all mankind. Kappa Nu Omega Alpha Kappa Alpha on Facebook.
Whistle Stop Bistro and Catering, 5435 East Nettleton Avenue at the four-way stop between highways 351 and 463, serving Jonesboro for over 5 years with a motto of, we cater them all, large or small, offers catering and rental space for parties, churches, offices, and fundraisers for holidays and all occasions. They also offer a full breakfast and lunch menu. Open Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. 870-275-6239. Details at klekfm.org.
New St. John Missionary Baptist Church, 308 North Main Street in Jonesboro, is under the direction of Reverend Ted T. Taylor Sr. Worship services are Sundays John has the Men of Standards Ministries, Outreach Ministry, Choir, Youth Ministry, Dance Ministry, and Missionary Society. www.newstjohn.org. Missionary Baptist Church on Facebook, 870-932-6915.
Did you know that KLEK 102.5 FM is a non-profit organization? Did you know that you can donate to KLEK 102.5 FM and your donation is tax deductible? Donations to non-profit organizations such as KLEK can reduce the amount of taxes you may owe the IRS or increase the amount of any potential tax refund. Support your KLEK today. You can donate by calling 870-277-1080, visiting our studio at 1411 Franklin Street in Jonesboro, or on our website, www.klekfm.org. We at KLEK 102.5 FM are blessed and grateful for your support. From the KLEK community calendar, there will be a fall block party October 25th from 5 o'clock p.m. until 7 o'clock p.m. and 700 block of Melrose and Marshall Loop in Jonesboro. There will be inflatables, hot dogs, chips, drink, candy, and music provided. Volunteers are welcome. More information is available via Blake Easley at beasley@jonesboro.org or 870-351-5379.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations, continuing with Mayor's Weekend Our guest for today is Mr. John W. Street. He is currently on the Jonesboro City Council, and he is running for mayor. Before we went to break, we were talking about public safety. And I'm going to let Kubila go ahead and ask the question that she has, and then I'll come back with my question about public safety taxes and reserve funds and all of that.
Okay, very quickly, you were talking about adding the swimming pools to the different sides of town, preferably where there are already community centers. And then this kind of ties into my other question that I will ask later about the jet system. But then we have to have a way to get the kids there. So most kids will have time to go on the weekends. And as of now, jet system doesn't have weekend service. And I know this is a broad question probably, but basically, how are we going to get them there? Will the city put in a proposal to open up services, either extended hours in the evenings and or Saturday or Sunday service?
For the jet service?
Yeah, so
Well, I've had a lot of people ask about Saturday service. That seems to be front and center on a lot of people's mind. I talked to Mr. Black, our director of Jets, and he tells me that, and Jets is a 50-50 federal split with the city. Excuse me. So we'd have to run 3 buses, and we'd have to run the paratransit. If we run the regular buses, we have to have a paratransit available as well.
okay.
Those cost $26.50 an hour per day. So that'd be 4 of those. And then we've got the drivers. We wouldn't have to pay drivers overtime because they're part-time drivers and they would work the Saturday routes. So somewhere around $42,000 a year, our cost, we could have a Saturday service. It might be somewhat limited, in regard. I think we had one before. Okay. The ridership was down a little bit. I believe they said we had somewhere around 80, maybe 80 people tops that rode it. But I believe now the jet service has built up considerably, and I think we'd have a lot more people ride that. But
shout out to Mrs. Farrell.
I certainly believe it's worth putting that in place and seeing just how far that'd go. I mean, if people really utilize it, $42,000 doesn't seem like a very big expense to provide that kind of service to folks, because you don't just need a bus from Monday through Friday. I wish we could run it Saturday, and you could run it to get people to church on Sunday or whatever, but I'd certainly look at implementing that Saturday route.
Okay. Well, what would it take for the citizens to get that issue on the agenda versus only discussing it at the end of a council meeting?
Well, there is a citizens advisory committee for Jets, and I think they would be the ones to really start pushing that. That would also come through the MPO. And I chair the policy committee of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, but also all of the mayors from the county are sitting members on that committee. So
now, if someone wanted to get in touch with that committee, how could they? Because I know Mrs. Farrell is listening, even though she may not can call in.
Erica Tate is the director.
Okay, Erica Tate, and just call her at City Hall.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and she's if she's busy, she'll call you back. You can leave a message, but she will get back with you, I promise.
All right, Mrs. Farrell, you hear that? Call Erica. Call Mrs. Farrell. I know you're listening. Call Erica Tate at City Hall so you and all your friends that want that Saturday bus service. That's what you got to do.
Well, also, and she can connect you with the committee that does put those things together and ask, and they may have in the past. I know it comes under city government, but nobody's officially come to us and made a request, I guess, to the council that says, hey, it costs this much money to put this service in. We'd like to see it put in, vote it up or down.
Okay.
Would you let us have it or not? It's never gotten to us.
Okay.
But again, I think if there is a demand out there and they let their voices be heard and they bring it to us, again, I don't think that $42,000 a year is too much for complete Saturday service for a year's worth of service, at least for a year, and try it. See what your ridership is.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
See how it'll benefit people.
Once again, we are speaking with Councilman John W. Street, candidate for mayor of the city of Jonesboro. And since we were talking about money and figures, this is something I was going to go back to earlier when you had mentioned about using city money to pay for the swimming pools. Well, as you know, the police department pay raises was officially passed. In fact, I attended the meeting in which you stood up and called for the vote on that resolution, and now they are considering the raises for the fire department as well as all the other city workers, but there has been some voices, some people who have said, well, first of all, no one I think is against raises, but there are some people that are concerned that this could cause budgetary issues in the future, that there may not be money to pay for these things, that could lead to either layoffs or cutbacks on equipment or facilities or something else, or even a possible tax to pay for these things. So Councilman Street, just want to kind of get your ideas on how do we sustain these raises and pay for these other things for the city, and the best way to go about it.
Yeah, number one, our taxes are up. Our tax collections are up 6.3% over where they were this time last year.
Okay.
On the police side of it, last year the police department turned back in $700,000 that they didn't spend that was budgeted to them.
Oh.
That's way more than the raise for the police department alone. But yes, we have in place the same step program for not only the police department and the fire department or uniform departments, but also the non-uniform department. And believe me, we're not paying these folks way more money than anybody else is. It seems like it's a big amount, but had we been paying them accordingly over the years, they'd already be making this money. We have not paid what we should have paid our employees, and the employees of your city, that is your city, that's your city services. They're deserving of a fair wage. This is based on cities comparable to us, and we have a great bunch of employees. I'm telling you, whether it's the police department, the fire department, sanitation, street department, those folks give their all, and they're deserving of an equal salary. Now, our tax collections have been up, and it gets down to a matter of priorities. But when you budget, you start your budget, well, the salary of your employees is going to take a priority on that budget. That may mean if your tax levels are down, something else may have to be cut, or you might not be able to do as much in one area as you would another, or maybe with some other project. But you got to put your people first. I truly believe in that. They're worthy of their hire. They do us a great job, and that is our city government. It's the service provided by those people, and we're not paying them an extraordinary amount of money. That survey came from Johansson, and it looks at cities our size and those folks doing the same jobs or comparable jobs. So we're just paying them what we ought to be paying them, and it's the first time since I've been on the council that we've finally done this across the board. We've just steadily kicked the can down the road, paying them for a year or two, then falling behind a couple more years, then giving them a little bit and falling behind. There were years that they got nothing. They didn't get any cost of living. They got nothing. So it's been a long way getting here. And yeah, the recession did cut things a little bit, and we had that temporary public safety tax. That was mainly to keep officers in place, keep firemen in place and officers in place. And at some point in time, there may need to be a tax for like a permanent half-cent tax for fire and police. The next two things that are really going to hit us as far as capital improvements and employees are going to be fire stations. The growth along the 49 corridor by NEA's medical complex and all of the subsequent growth that's gone on out there, as well as the residential growth, is going to demand that, I guess, in the next 5-year plan, we put another fire station in northeast Jonesboro somewhere. And the same exact thing is happening in southwest Jonesboro. We'll have to have a fire station in the Valley View area to cover the growth we've had out there.
Okay.
And with 226 opening up, I'm sure you're going to see more and more commercial.
And it's so much more fun driving down 226 now that they've
finished it. It's fantastic. And I tell you, we worked on that a long time. I began to wonder if I was ever going to see that in my lifetime, but it took a lot of work from a lot of people. Again, Alec Farmer, he helped us drastically with that. All of our state legislators, our governor, Beebe, when Mike Beebe was governor. Of course, Jonesboro's like his second home.
Okay.
So, and he's here at every ball game. He's a loyal Red Wolf.
Yeah, I got right before we launched the radio station, I got a chance to take a picture with him at a game.
Yeah, but Mike comes to all the games, and I'm here to tell you that's the closest thing to having a hometown governor that we've ever had, I guess, since Ed Cherry. But I wasn't alive, or I was very young when Ed Cherry was our governor. But Mike Beebe helped us a lot. He sure pushed 226, and a lot of people worked. I mean, it took a lot of collaborative involvement from people to get I-555 designated, and a lot of people don't see the importance of that. But when a lot of industry looks at Jonesboro, they have certain checkpoints they have to do. Do they have a public transit system? Well, that's good. They check that.
Okay.
Interstate access, and before they couldn't check it. So they might stop right there and say, well, okay, Jonesboro, you're out. We're not going to look at you because you don't have interstate access, because that's extremely important to industry. I always thought rail was more important, but it's not. Most of those goods that they produce and products, they go out via truck. A lot of their raw materials come in by truck, and a lot of them go out by truck.
Yes.
So that interstate access is a big deal, and that'll give us a foothold on a lot of different industries that formerly wouldn't look at us because of that. It won't move any more cars, but it is interstate classification, and it makes a big difference when industry looks at us.
Okay.
All right, Councilman Street, speaking of industry, what will you do to attract more industry if you're elected mayor, as well as more recreation and other things to the city?
Well, that's a big point that I'd push on industrial recruitment. The governor goes out and cold calls industry that's looking for a place to relocate.
Okay.
And I think the mayor needs to be very actively involved in seeking industry and jobs for the city. Who better to sell the city than the mayor? Okay. And I'd load up. I know our old mayor, Mayor Hubert Brodell, used to go. He tried to get us a mall for years, but he didn't just sit back and wait for somebody to call and say, hey, y'all need a mall in Jonesboro? No, he loaded up. He got on a plane. He went wherever they were. If he knew they were trying to look for an area to put a mall, he was out there trying to get them to come to Jonesboro. And guys, we've got a lot to offer here. I mean, a lot to offer. We're the cheapest utilities in the state of Arkansas, and we're in the top 2 cheapest utilities in the United States of America. We have a great and unlimited almost supply of water, and we have a good quantity and a quality. And that's big to a lot of industry. A lot of our industries are food, but one of the reasons that I think that they're here is because of our quality and quantity of water. But we're locationally in the central part of the United States. We have great access via rail and interstate now to other parts of the country. So it's a lot easier to get your goods, your raw products in, get your goods out. It minimizes your transportation costs. We've got a great workforce here. I've talked to numerous people who are plant managers and ask them, I'm always curious, why did you come to Jonesboro? What was the balance? What broke that and made you decide on us? And there's a lot of things. We have a great quality of life here. Our kids enjoy great schools. We have great education and a good quality of it. That's another thing they look at. We've got great shopping here. We're the biggest medical facility between Memphis, Little Rock, and St. Louis, so we have a big draw for that. With our mall and our business shopping district, we have a draw of over 100,000 people to Jonesboro. Anytime you drive around, you look at license plates at the mall or at Sam's, you see all the out-of-state tags, Missouri, Tennessee. I mean, just look at it sometime, you'll be amazed at where those people come from. In fact, we have a lot of people that come here and shop from Memphis because it's quicker to get here if they're on the west side of Memphis than it is to get across Memphis. So they drive over here from Memphis.
Yes, sir. And speaking of which, because we'll make sure we get all of these topics in. We got a lot of other topics to cover. So, Councilman Street, what are your views on the convention centers? As you know, this has been a contentious topic. We've got one that's under construction, one that's about to be under construction. As you know, the A&P commissions opted to support the one that's going to be out by 555 as opposed to the ASU one. Do you think that the city can support both convention centers? And just what are your general overall thoughts on that issue?
Well, I believe, it's going to be nice. That's a good problem to have, like you talked about. We never had one. We wanted one. Now we're going to have 2, it looks like. But I believe that, the only support they actually got from they got the A&P support, but I believe they offered the same thing to ASU that they offered to the project out here at the old service center. I believe they offered them both the same thing. Now, there was only, I think Mayor Perrin said he had $400,000 grant that was only available for him to give to one, and he awarded that to the one out there on the.
So would you have done that differently if you were mayor?
I don't know. I would have probably made, if it had to go to one person, I wasn't in on that decision-making process for that particular grant. They didn't come to council and ask us. It wasn't a requirement to come to council, so I don't really know. I wasn't involved in their process, but I certainly would think that ASU's if they decide to do it, I'm pretty sure they've got the stats to show that they can support it. With their hospitality courses, I'm sure they'll use it a lot. They have a lot of draws in here from a lot of different events and seminars and things going on that I'm sure they can promote and utilize their convention center if they decide to build it. I believe they probably can be a driving force to have enough events to justify it. The one here, again, if you look around Jonesboro at our size and we're constantly growing, you have like the Realtor Association. You could have the Arkansas Realtors could come here for a convention. The Arkansas Municipal League, typically they go back and forth between Little Rock or North Arkansas, Rogers, used to go to Hot Springs, but now they could come here for an event. It wouldn't be every year, but they could put it in their rotation. You could have a lot of different functions and a lot of different organizations who have their conventions here in Jonesboro. So, I mean, I guess time will tell if it'll be profitable, but I think these folks who make their decisions, they make it based on a business model, and I'm sure they've got something to indicate that, yes, it will be successful, that it is something that will be a feasible enterprise. So if ASU does it, I'm sure it's not going to be a failure. I'm sure that they can justify its existence, and I believe the one here can. Now, the hoteliers, as I read, and I read just what you read in the paper, I think they ended up supporting the one out here at the old Service Center site because it's right there where their hotels are, just a few blocks from there. It's close to the mall, it's close to the other venues that they share, and when we have an event here, our hotels are full. I mean, they're full. In fact, they go to Paragould, they sell out there, they sell out in Truman, they sell out everywhere around us when we have a big event. So, time will tell, I guess, but it's a good problem to have, two convention centers, and hopefully we'll be able as a city to utilize them both.
All right, and speaking of problems, we're going to go ahead and transition into our next issue. I promise I'll let you get out in after the next one. But I want to make sure we get everything covered on the list. Councilman Street, one of the most contentious issues of 2016 was the property maintenance code, of course. Kind of a little background for the one or two people under the rock that may not know. There was a property maintenance code that was proposed. It went before the council. It was a tie vote. Mayor Perrin broke the tie to pass the code. There was a recall election, and the code was repealed. And the people who wanted the code, they were saying that, well, we need this because there are blighted houses. We have renters who complain that their landlords won't fix issues within their homes or their apartments that they're renting. So they tried to come up with this to fix it, but it ultimately was repealed. But the blighted houses and the renters who are still having problems, that didn't go away. So this is probably not the last that people will see of this issue. So Councilman Street, what do you think is going to take to resolve this issue once and for all?
Well, we need to enforce the codes that we've got. We have adequate codes on the books to take care of that. I'm totally against the property code, the minimum property maintenance code as it was introduced. I would fight it again. I did fight it. I went out and got signatures for that, to repeal it. I worked very diligently to repeal that code. It was not right. It was going to be very harmful to poor people and elderly people anywhere in the city. And I think it was going to cause people a whole lot more problems than they thought. You're talking about elimination of a lot of properties. There's still a lot of properties out there that are older, especially single-family residential, not particularly multifamily, but single-family residential that people rent. They might have 15 or 20 years of life left, but it wouldn't warrant bringing that up to the standard of that minimum property maintenance code. So basically, you just have to have the property torn down, and that would take a lot of our housing stock away. It wouldn't give people the options they have. I know when my wife and I got married, we were both in college. We rented an apartment down on Matthews. That apartment wouldn't have qualified at all by that code, but it was $150 a month, utilities paid. But I tell you what, it gave us the option to have a place to live, afford, and go to college. And if you take away the options of somebody's ability to afford a place to live, you're basically going to run them out of town. You're saying, well, we don't want you in Jonesboro, go to Bay or Brooklyn or Truman or someplace where you can afford something. And I guarantee you there's not a soul out there, if they were offered an apartment, for a nice apartment for $350 a month, they'd take it. But that's not going to happen. Price point for homes, whether it's mobile home, a starter home, a large home, an older home, people tend to do what they can afford. But everything is not going to be new, and you're always going to have a problem with something that's that there's always going to be tension between a tenant and a landlord, and it may just be their particular personalities, but a tenant has a right to walk, and if somebody wants to keep their property rented, and most of them do, it's a business decision, they'll maintain them.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We're going to have to leave it right there. We are speaking with Councilman John W. Street, candidate for mayor of Jonesboro. Don't forget, if you got a call or a question for him, you still can call in at 870-277-1080. Once again, that phone number is 870-277-1080. Still streaming live on Facebook. We will be right back on KLEK 102.5 FM.
You're listening to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM. We'll be right back.
We're back with Money Matters. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. It may be time to shut down the Bank of YOU. Here's how to stop being a human ATM. First, never lend money you can't afford to give away. When anyone asks to borrow money from you, always ask yourself, what would happen if they don't pay you back? If you do lend, only lend from discretionary funds. That's whatever you have left over after you put money towards your savings, your debt, your emergency fund, and retirement, and you've paid all of your bills and expenses. If there's no money left, that means no lending. If you really care about them, encourage independence. Don't enable dependency. Constantly bailing others out of financial jams doesn't really help them in the long run. If someone is always in financial trouble, the best you can do is direct them to online resources like blackenterprise.com or debtadvice.org to help them change their habits. Whatever you do, stop making their money problems your responsibility. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr. for Money Matters, a product of American Urban Radio Networks.
Money Matters is made possible by the Jonesboro Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uncompromising commitment to communities, service, leadership, empowerment. www.jonesboroalumnidst.org.
Attention members and guests. KLEK 102.5 FM and Legends 1025 presents the A-State After Party for grown folks. It's going down after every Arkansas State home football game this season at Legends 1025, 1025 West Johnson Avenue in front of Riceland Foods. Admission starts at just $5. 21 and up to enter. Live broadcast on KLEK 102.5 FM. Music by DJ Sharkzilla. Hosted by Mr. Chew. Let's cheer on the Arkansas State Red Wolves to victory. And then celebrate after each home game at Legends 1025. These events are KLEK fundraisers.
The first 30 ladies get in free. The court-appointed special advocate program of the 2nd Judicial District presents Run Crazy for CASA 5K yearly race fundraiser, Saturday, November 5th at the ASU Pavilion. Start time is 8:00 a.m. Registration for runners and walkers is ongoing, and Halloween costumes are encouraged to be worn but not required. Prizes will be awarded to the top 3 male and female winners in each age group, as well as the top 5 overall male and female finishers. There will also be t-shirts, pizza, massages, and a costume contest. Proceeds from the 5K will be used to help CASA's mission of helping children taken into foster care due to abuse and neglect. Registration for the 5K and other information is available at neacasa.org. CASA is a nonprofit organization. The A-Man program presents the Let's Work 3-on-3 basketball tournament, Workforce Development Initiative, Saturday, October 22nd, starting at 2:00 p.m. This event will take place at the downtown Jonesboro Union Street parking lot. Registration begins at 1:30 p.m. The tournament will have age divisions from ages 10 to 18 and up. Trophies will be awarded in all divisions. Live DJ and remote broadcast will be provided by KLEK 102.5 FM. Sponsorship, sign up, and other information is available at 870-203-0995. First Baptist Church presents Revive Us Again Revival, October 18th through the 20th. The revival starts at 7 o'clock p.m. each night. The special revivalist is the Reverend Jamil Wesley, pastor of 8th Street Missionary Baptist Church in North Little Rock, Arkansas. The revival will take place at First Baptist Church, 700 Kitchen Street in Jonesboro. Reverend Curtis R. Wilson, pastor.
House of Details, located at 4903 East Nettleton Avenue, is a proud supporter of KLEK, offering detailing on any type of vehicle, basic wash, hand wash, shampoo, interior cleaning, waxing, buffering, headlight restoration, pickup, delivery, and more, with a motto of anything mean, we can clean. Details at 870-273-5187. House of Details on Facebook and KLEKFM.org.
And now back to Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM.
And we're back on Community Conversations with our guest, Mr. John W. Street, candidate for mayor of Jonesboro. And Quabila has a question for Mr. Street about flooding and drainage.
Yes, when we've talked about a lot of different things, concerning bringing more businesses, recreation, and, et cetera, into the city. Well, of course, when it comes to development, you're going to have to rework the land. Well, then that entails, that brings some more issues. As we know, Jonesboro has an issue with flooding, and I know a lot of it is out in the county, outside the city limits, but we have had some major flooding within the city. So how would you, as mayor, work with, say, the city planning or other departments to say, okay, how can we, within the next 5 years, before we bring a business in, let's look at the projections. How can we possibly prevent more flooding or even fix the flooding issues that we already have?
Well, right now, and I'm glad you asked that because I worked hard. When I got on the council 14 years ago, we had really bad flooding. Anytime we had a fairly significant rain event, we'd have water in about 240 to 250 properties. It'd either be in their home, it'd be in their garage, or it'd be in their outbuildings, but it was in buildings. We got busy and constructed numerous detention ponds around Jonesboro, which, well, we also studied our drainage system to see what we had. Nobody had ever done a drainage study, but you can't start from the top down. You have to start from the bottom up. And in other words, we had an issue where somebody literally had a flooding problem. They went out and dug up the pipe, put in a 42-inch pipe, but it ran down to an 18-inch pipe. That was on downstream. Well, it actually caused more flooding than it did good. So we finally got a study together to see what our drainage system was. Once we did, we could work backwards and go up. And these detention ponds, all they do is simply hold the water from a pretty significant rainfall and release it at a level that your existing drainage system will handle. Well, after we put that in place, our calls went from about 240 calls with people having water in their homes and properties down to almost none. And I don't even remember up until this last, and this was probably a 500-year flood. This was not something that was normal at all. I've lived here all my life, and I've never seen that much water in that amount of time. We had 6 inches of rain in 3 hours. It's kind of like Houston or Louisiana. It makes no difference what you have in place. You're going to flood. It's just more water than anybody's system can handle. We did go ahead. We've had, since I've been on this council, again, we've had a crew that does nothing but maintain ditches. Now we've got over 81 miles of ditches that you can put excavators in, heavy equipment, and another 300 miles of ditches that you go along and have to mow. And if you look down any of these ditches, you can see one cleaned out, and 2 weeks later, you see willow trees going right back up through them. So we've got a crew that does nothing but constantly works those ditches. Now, since that heavy rain event we had, we've spent $1.6 million and hired a firm to hit all of our ditches at one time, get us all caught up, boom. We doubled the amount of equipment. We've purchased we purchased one big excavator. The other one has been approved. It went to finance the other day. It'll be on council tomorrow night. We'll purchase another cat. That basically effectively doubled the size of the equipment that we have in ditches. So we doubled up on that, and we'll continue to add to that. But there are areas in Jonesboro, these basins, we've got 9 different drainage basins here. Being on top of Crowley's Ridge, we have a unique topography. It's unlike anything else in the country. We do our best to control the flow of water that we can. With our growth, it's kind of hard, but there is the law says you can't, on new development, you can't add more water to drainage or no more water can leave the site after it's developed than left the site before at that rate. So no matter what they build, they have to put detention in. They have to release that water at the same rate it did before they built it. Sam's, you see that big pond over there in front of Sam's?
Yes.
Most people think that's ridiculous, but that's actually what it takes to handle the flood water for that much runoff, for that roof area and that lot. And during that last event, that was almost full. But people finally said, hey, now I see why that's so big and what it does.
Okay.
But those ponds around town do. Now, the next thing we can do, and we are working with them, we're working with Corps of Engineers for a grant. We're working with FEMA. Corps of Engineers right now is working on Little Bay Ditch. It'll be 2 years before they get it cleaned out to us. But if our ditches are perfect, from here to Poinsett County, there's all kinds of snaky ditches, and there's no place. If you can't get that water out of here downstream, it goes down a little ways and it backs up on you, and that's part of our problem. But we have some areas that are in floodways. Now, when we put in regional detention, which is what I'd like to start working on, we can pull some of the floodways out of North Jonesboro and make some of that available for more development. And that's going to have to be done before we can develop it, though.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We are speaking with Councilman John W. Street, candidate for mayor of the city of Jonesboro. We want to thank Mr. Street for stopping by the studio. And before I give Mr. Street an opportunity to say his final comments, just want to say once again, KLEK and the Voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council does not endorse nor support any candidate for office, nor was any compensation provided for this interview. This interview was provided for informational purposes only. Mr. Street, you have 2 minutes to make your case as why you should be the next mayor of Jonesboro.
Well, the mayor sets the tone of what the city's priorities are going to be, and budget, but the mayor do a lot of work, a lot of just before access is attainable. I mean, you can have the best parks and facilities in the world, and if kids can't get to them, they're not of any use. So I'd love a program. I'd love to see us be able to make jets available or more available for kids in the summertime to be able to get to some of these places. Now, how to do that, I'm not sure based on their ages, but I'm sure if we put our heads together, we can figure out a way to do it. But Jonesboro is constantly growing. I'd get out and I'd work for more jobs, better paying jobs. I would work to improve our drainage, again, as we talked about, by starting with some of the drainage basins and working with the drainage districts, trying to get those back in operation again so that we could actually widen some of the ditches outside of the city limits and get rid of some of the water that tends to accumulate when we have a heavy rain event.
All right, Mr. Street, we're going to have to leave it there. We got about 15 seconds left. Thank you once again, Mr. Street, for stopping by the studio. Early voting starts October 24th. Get out, make your voice known. We'll be back tomorrow. Mayor's Week continues tomorrow on KLEK 102.5 FM. You all have a great and blessed day. We'll see you tomorrow.